Hey now everyone, welcome to Board Game Brawl. My name is Nick, and this is your Kickstarter board game update for September 9th, 2013. Now, I just did a Kickstarter update maybe 2.5 weeks ago, and I said then that it's unlikely I would do it more than maybe once a month because, you know, I'm only doing board game projects and tabletop projects that really interest me, and, you know, not too many of those come out, so maybe once a month would be good. But for whatever reason, in the last 2 weeks, a lot of really cool, really interesting projects came out, and I felt like, hell, let's just go ahead and do an update for them just to let you know what's out there. Now, if you want to check out these games, any of the ones that I showcase, you can go ahead and go to Kickstarter.com, and they have a horrible search function on that site. I will say that as a negative against Kickstarter, but you can either go into the top of the search field at the top of the front page and just type in the exact word for word title of these games, or you can go to the Discover Projects section, go to Gaming, go to Tabletop Gaming, and then go to Popular Projects. Look for that link on the page. Even though it says Popular Projects, it'll eventually list every single project in tabletop games. So I know it's kind of annoying, but Kickstarter that's the best you can do for that. So we got a lot of ground to cover. Let's just go ahead and get right to it. So starting with Alien Uprising. Now, Alien Uprising is designed by Richard Launius and also co-designed by Sean Brown. Now, both of these are pretty big heavyweights, I would say, in the gaming industry. Sean Brown's worked on a ton of different projects and all kinds of different roles as producer and such, but Richard Launius, among gaming circles, is kind of the next best thing to a household name. He's done Arkham Horror, Defenders of the Realm. I mean, he knows his co-ops, and Alien Uprising is a co-op game where you are all survivors of a crashed starship who are trying to fend off and survive against alien attacks, and it just looks really cool. Cool miniatures, cool artwork, cool design. I'm really looking forward to it, so keep an eye on that one. And while we're on the topic of Richard Launius, he's also got a very different thematically game called Legends of the American Frontier. And this game is actually not co-op, it's competitive. It's not the type of thing that normally interests me. It has to do with the great frontiersmen of the 1800s, and apparently Launius was very enamored with like Davy Crockett and people like that. And so you're actually taking the role of a frontiersman and actually crafting their life from beginning to end to, you know, sort of build their legend, as the title infers. So I don't think the theme is that interesting to me, but I really like the way the gameplay sounds. If you're interested in it at all, I urge you to go and check out the rule book. Really interesting progression there. I've got my eye on it, and the project does need some help, so check it out. Another game sort of back to the sci-fi realm is called Infamy. This one looks cool. It's kind of a competitive game where you are trying to rise through the ranks to become a crime boss in the future on Mars. And the artwork looks cool, very comic booky, I got a Shadowrun vibe from it, if you're familiar with Shadowrun, the RPG in the video game. So I like that a lot. So it seems like it needs a little bit of help too, and I am interested in that for sure. Still sticking with sci-fi. New project called 404 Law Not Found. So this looks like a really, really clever theme, really fun theme. You are each player is taking control of a robot on a starship. And, you know, if you're familiar with Isaac Asimov's and his laws of robotics, robots are supposed to follow certain laws, always obey humans, always protect humans, and then always protect your own existence. And, you know, there's all kinds of little caveats to those. But in this game, you're playing the robots, and you get your directives all get screwed up. You get new microchips, and all your directives are screwed up. You're dealt out random cards at the beginning of the game telling you what your new directives are. And it could be anything from making sure every module of the spaceship is blown out to the vacuum of space, and basically everything it could be the exact opposites of the normal laws of robotics. And at the same time, while you're doing all your actions, you're trying to get the humans to do certain actions, and there's a monkey and bananas involved somehow. I don't know, it seems crazy, it seems really interesting. Check it out if the theme interests you. Sojourner Tales. Now, this one's pretty interesting. If you're familiar with Tracy and Laura Hickman, they're pretty well known in like hardcore fantasy circles for being intimately involved with Dragonlance and Ravenloft campaign settings of Dungeons and Dragons. I'm pretty sure they basically created them. These were settings that really interested me a long time ago, and they're still writing their own fantasy books and such. So the way this game works, it's a fantasy storytelling game where you're actually going, you're getting basically downloadable episodes via e-reader, whether it's your Kindle, your laptop, or your phone, and you'll decide what story you're going to go through, and you'll have the board and such, and what you do on the board affects how you're going through the story. I don't know. It seems kind of strange. It is a roll and move game. That was a huge red flag for me. If you look at the components, it doesn't look like there's actually much to it. You're basically just rolling and moving your pawn around. And how that actually interacts with the e-reader story, I don't know. I'm always very hesitant of sort of gimmicky games like this. But it could be interesting. Certainly, if you're interested in those authors, then you should check it out for sure. Now, Belle of the Ball, this is very different from the other games I've talked about. This is just a simple card game where you are taking control of a host at a party. And I guess you're all at the same party, or maybe you're at different parties, I don't know. But you're trying to make sure that the right kind of guests for you get into the party and keep out the wrong kind of guests. And it's, it looks like sort of Victorian era party, and you're trying to get your guests in, keep other guests out. Maybe you want certain bad guests in to give you points, things like that. It seems a little confusing, but the game has beautiful artwork that is absolutely, positively not supposed to look like any kind of particular Disney movie at all, I'm sure. But nevertheless, it looks really nice. Got a nice theme. I like the idea of it. It's also got ridiculous names that I hope they don't change. Seriously, I hope they keep them because they're just that ridiculous. But do check that out. That's Belle of the Ball. And then we have We Didn't Playtest This Pace It On theme at all. Now, if you're familiar with the We Didn't Playtest This at All series, it's from Asmodee Games, not to be confused with Asmodee Games. And it's just a ridiculous party card game where it's like if you played Flux, but with all that ridiculousness, but then realized that having rules is for suckers. So why have ever-changing rules when you just have no rules at all? So, but I like it. I hate Flux, but I like We Didn't Playtest This at all because it's just stupid, silly. It's hilarious. You just laugh, and games can be 1 minute long or 10 minutes long. Really fun game. A lot of different sets in that series, and this is the newest set. Really strange. This Kickstarter was only up for 5 days. I've never seen a 5-day Kickstarter before, at least not in board gaming projects. So there's only about a day left when I'm filming this. So if you want it, you should go and support it now. Although I'm sure they'll have it for sale later. That's We Didn't Playtest This at all. We didn't playtest this Pace It On theme at all. Septicon Uranium Wars. This one looks really interesting. It's got a really interesting cover art and concept. It's sort of a 2-player Euro worker. I don't know if worker placement is the right word, but each player is taking control of an orbital mining satellite, and you're battling out against each other to try to get to these uranium deposits before your opponent does, and you're using little armies of clones to work in your mines and to try to sabotage your opponents. And of course, the miners, the clone miners, are little meeples. So got a very interesting art style, very interesting concept. I'd be eager to see what it's like. Goblins versus Zombies. So this is another tower defense game. You remember in my last Kickstarter, I mentioned the tower defense game called The King's Armory. And these kind of games are going to become more and more popular because I think a lot of board games emulate video games, and there are a lot of tower defense video games. And of course, Plants vs. Zombies, which I'm sure is the inspiration for Goblins vs. Zombies, is the biggest one of them all. Definitely looks kind of interesting. Unique little art style. It's got 5 game modes. You can go solo, cooperative, competitive, and some variations on that. Looks interesting. You should check it out if you're interested in that. Now, Alchemist Academy. I'm always interested in spellcasting games, especially with sort of anime-style art, which this one has. Basically, you play magical students, sort of like, I don't know, Harry Potter meets any other number of different animes, like Negima or something. And you're just casting spells at each other, trying to be the best in class. It looks interesting. It's gotten some good buzz, although I should mention that this is the second time this Kickstarter has been up. The first time the project was canceled when it was clear it was not going to fund, so take that for what it's worth, but it looks like it might make it this time. Son Goku. Now, this is very interesting. This is a poker-style card game, poker-style cards that's got a really, really beautiful artwork that's based on Japanese myths and legends. You'll recognize it as such as soon as you see it. It looks really great, and it's actually designed by Mike Elliott. So if you've watched my other videos, that might sound familiar. Mike Elliott was the designer of Agent Hunter, a game that I reviewed, a very simple card game that I like quite a bit. He's also the designer of the forthcoming Lost Legends, which I listed as my number 10 for top 10 anticipated games of Gen Con. I think that was actually for sale at Gen Con, but it hasn't been released in the US yet for retail. But that's not all. That guy has designed Thunderstone. He's had a hand in Quarriors. I was really shocked to see that he designed a couple of Japanese collectible card games like Duel Masters. But anyways, the guy's got a lot of irons in the fire. Really interesting. I like his design concepts. So Son Goku looks like a simple game, but I like Agent Hunter. That's even more simple. So I'll probably check this one out as well. Fantasy Frontier. Now, I liked Fantasy Frontier better when it was called Kings of Air and Steam. No, all right, that's kind of a... First off, that's probably a false statement because I have Kings of Air and Steam, and it's an okay game. I have to play that one again because I'm not really sure about it. But Fantasy Frontier does seem very similar. It's an airship game where you're... it actually looks a little more complex because you're doing worker placement, tile placement, resource management. It's got a really cool, very high fantasy art style that I do like. So I will keep my eye on that. It looks like it's got a lot of good buzz around it. Battle Merchants. Now, speaking of Kickstarter projects that failed the first time, there is Battle Merchants from Minions Games, which was also canceled, didn't make its funding the first time, and it's back again. Looks like it's doing a little bit better this time. But I don't know what to think about the theme of this because it's a fantasy theme with cartoonish type art. Okay, it looks kind of cool. But all the players are war profiteers, and you're trying to... it's basically like a Eurogame style where you're trying to get the most profit by selling your weapons to these different battling fantasy races like elves and goblins. And I don't know, I'm not usually sensitive to that kind of stuff, but being a war profiteer sounds kind of, I don't know, it's kind of against the lighthearted fantasy theme. But if that's your thing, you should check it out. That's called Battle Merchants. Cubist. This looks really interesting to me. I love dice games, and in Cubist, uses a ton of multicolored iridescent dice. Just normal dice, nothing special about them. They're D6s. But you have these cards that have geometric shapes on them, and you're trying to use your dice to actually make abstract sculptures on the cards in this whatever layout you have. It definitely looks like a pretty game, a beautiful game. I would be interested to try it. I love dice games, and it looks interesting to me. That one's called Cubist. And finally, Burning Suns. Now, Burning Suns has also been on Kickstarter before and didn't quite make it. In fact, I was doing a little research for this. It was back and forth on Kickstarter since 2012, I think, if I'm reading that correctly. But this is kind of a sci-fi tactical starship battling game. It's got tons of cool little miniatures, and in fact, it's got some of the coolest things I've ever seen. It's got ships that you're going to take a multitude of different sided die, put them on the ships, and it will determine like what kind of ship it is or what the stats are or something like that. But looks really cool. I mean, even if you don't necessarily want to play the game that much, maybe you can get the ships because it looks as little die holders. But it looks like I think it's already funded this time, so whatever adjustments they've made to their campaign, they've done it right this time. So that's Burning Suns. You should check it out if you're interested. And that's basically all that I was interested in Kickstarter at this time. There's a lot of other projects, some stuff that just didn't. It's popular, but just wasn't that interested in. But if there are a ton of Kickstarter board game projects at any given time, a lot of RPG projects if that's your thing. I dabble in RPGs as well. So if you are interested, you should definitely go to Kickstarter.com, check the tabletop gaming section, sift through all of them. If it's your first time on Kickstarter and you're into board games, you're going to have a blast. Everyone remembers their first time on Kickstarter. It's the descent into madness after that, and the descent into your wallet being empty at any given time. But I love Kickstarter. I love board games. It's a lot of fun. I hope that you've seen something that you like. If you didn't, you should go and check it out and see what else you like. Look at the comic book section. Look at all the other sections. Lots of good stuff on Kickstarter. Thank you for watching. My name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl, reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.